that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Hamlet. What am I gonna say? I mean, like, honestly, like, it's Shakespeare. If there's anything in contemporary theater, acting, literature, poetry, anything, there are stuff before Shakespeare, but everything has been influenced by Shakespeare. So I don't have anything new to say. I'm not adequate to do so. All to say that I never properly sat down and have read any of these plays. Neither have I really sat down and watched the plays. Like, I've seen, Romeo and Juliet adaptations. I've read the book in school. I did watch the early 2000s or late 90s Romeo and Juliet with, Leonardo DiCaprio. That was like a modern take. So I've seen all that. But I've never probably sat down and just absorbed it. And yeah, it's really hard with, this older speech, but if you just keep reading, you kind of get used to it. It's easier than Cervantes with the Canterbury Tales. That's Cervantes is somebody else. I meant Chaucer. Got my C's mixed up. But without a guide, Canterbury Tales for me is like almost impossible. It is even older and more archaic because it came out before Shakespeare. Shakespeare, you can kind of find that rhythm and understand it. Even still, there are parts that are a bit hard to grasp. But I watched not a modern, or I guess it is a modern rendition, but they didn't change anything. Like the Leonardo DiCaprio one from memory, it was the basic plot, but it like changed the words, changed, it was modern times. I watched a 2018 Andrew Scott. If you don't know who Andrew Scott is, there's a movie that came out in 2025 called Blue Moon with Ethan Hawke. He was in that. He was Moriarty on the Sherlock Holmes show with Benedict Cumberbatch, and he was the priest on Fleabag season 2. I really like Andrew Scott. Anyway, so there was a modern rendition. After I finished the play, I read it myself. And of course, I did the Hamlet bits, so I got to try that out. Probably not a character I can do justice, but it was something that was fun to do on my own time for fun. But then I watched Andrew Scott, the 2018 rendition that retains every dialogue verbatim from Shakespeare without changing it, but the background, the set, everything, it is modern times. There is 2018 modern times. They use guns instead of a blade, but they don't really address that because the play doesn't specifically say anything about that either. So it kind of works out to kind of just be able to play with that a little bit. That being said, Andrew Scott, I've seen several renditions since, and many, not that there's anything wrong with it. Who am I to say? I have a certain notion when going into plays and stuff of a certain veneer of actors when they're doing their stuff, because, and it's by virtue of the art form. It's not anything against it. I mean, theater, play was itself the oldest form of storytelling, even before novels or anything. I mean, we just told stories to one another, and that evolved into plays and theater, and eventually evolved into cinema and so on and so on. And of course, I'm trying to be an actor, and I might not succeed in that. But I'm aiming for TV and film, not because I think I'm better than anyone else, but just because you know on the one hand, theater gives you great background for if you do larger than life roles in cinema and TV. But when it comes to subtle, nuanced performances, it's a bit harder to capture on a stage because, especially if it's a big, performance, right? You are, maybe in modern times they put cameras so you can kind of zoom in, to the actors and stuff for the people that are all the way in the back, right? So it's a little bit easier to do nuance in plays now. But like back in the day, right? You had people standing all the way back there, up in the higher columns, right? There's no cameras. There's nothing to get closer. So you have to project to make sure that people are getting it. And so I always found that frustrating because the nuance wasn't there. But I felt with the 2018 Hamlet with Andrew Scott, there was so much nuance between every actor, and I quite enjoyed it. And it really, in a way that it never had before, breathed life and sprang it into my brain, the story of Hamlet, which, again, is nothing particularly crazy. Here's the thing, it would have been one of the first, right? But we've seen renditions of this in some way, shape, or form so many times before. With similar plots and whatnot. But again, same thing with Conan and other stories that I've read in the past that are the originators of a lot of fantasy or space opera. Hamlet is a play that is all the way back from the 1500s, right? This is when Shakespeare was writing all this. So he's one of the first. And yet, now, in 2026, it is still so human, so sure, the words may be archaic, but depending on how you portray it, whether in your mind or watching a play, it is so vastly human. I mean, in case you don't know, essentially the king of Denmark he dies. And now his brother is the king and marries his brother, who's now dead, his wife, the queen. And Hamlet, from the get-go, already has suspicions that there was some foul play, that his uncle did this on purpose to take the throne and ascend. Later on, in the play, it's on a security screen. But of course, in the original version, it was, they were like on top of this castle walls and they see this spirit out there. Or so they claim. Because later on in the story, too, we will have doubts of whether or not Hamlet saw anything, and is he just insane? Because Horatio claims that he, too, saw the ghost all the way back in the beginning. However, I guess you could interpret that, I don't know, that he said exactly what Hamlet wanted to hear because he suspected the same thing and wanted vengeance for his king. I don't know. I'm asserting a lot into that's not necessarily there. But it is a bit weird that if Horatio did see this ghost, and he genuinely did mean that, then it kind of belittles the later questioning of whether or not he actually saw the ghost. Unless Horatio was lying. And if Horatio didn't see it, then that pulls into question greater things. I don't know if you can hear that. That's unfortunate. Well, it's not going to stop anytime soon, so I'm going to wrap this up. But anyway, it's just so very human, and it still breathes and flows and works well today. And Hamlet has to be one of the most introspective characters that I've read about in a long time, and I really enjoyed his character. And yeah, he's conflicted, but he's human, and he's not like a good guy. He's not a bad guy either, and neither is Horatio, neither, I think, even is the uncle, or his mother, or Ophelia. All these characters are super nuanced and I mean, they're not wildly complex, but still way more than I expected for the 1500s. And Hamlet is such a writer main character. Like he's introspective and he questions a lot. And of course, you have the famous "to be or not to be." That is the question, which I think many people mischaracterize as being about suicide. Even if that's passively on his mind, that is not the point. This is right before he decides to make the play, which is all just a ruse, so we can see how his uncle reacts to the play. If his uncle reacts in a certain way, he's going to take that as confirmation that he did indeed kill his father. So all this is really about action versus inaction, but he's also suffering in great amounts of pain over his father's death, because clearly there is a tight bond there, which again, the play does a significant job of, despite the fact that we never really get to see the interactions between father and son. Based on Hamlet's constant interactions with everyone else, I can see the great relationship he must have had with his father to have this reaction. And so the to be or to not to be, it's not really about him and whether he should live or die. He already knows he's going to make a decision here one way or the other on what he's going to do. The real thing here, the real story, or the real thing here is that there is suffering in the world. Everybody suffers. And the easy thing would be to just kill yourself and end it as to escape the suffering, unless there is such... Everybody suffers. So, why not just end it? But the undiscovered country, the great unknown, is after death. And back then, people were a lot more religious. I don't think Hamlet necessarily is. He's somewhere in the middle, I think. But because of the fact he has no certainty on it, maybe he is a little depressed. But if he knew for certainty, that killing himself would end it, or that if everybody killed themselves, it would end the pain, then absolutely. But it's that question. Is this it? Or is there more after? And will I suffer more after? That refrains people from doing so. And I think that applies even today with, the staunchest atheist to the most religious. I mean, it is always the what if I'm wrong, And I think that stays a lot of hands. However, I will make the case, and, again, I don't try to proselytize or preach, but look at the amount of suicides we have in the last 20 years as opposed to like 50 years ago, just the United States, let alone the rest of the world. I think you'll see that number has significantly increased. I don't have statistics for you right there. It's kind of anecdotal, but I'm almost can verify that would be backed up. There's more suicides now, plus all the school shootings and everything and stuff. But think about when there was less gun control, but like 50 years ago, or I guess more now, because 50 years ago was the 70s. So let's make that 70 years ago, and it was the 50s. Okay. And more people are religious, though. So again, are you going to kill yourself if you might go to hell afterwards and suffer even more than you already are suffering? Probably not. You going to go to school and shoot a bunch of kids if you might go to hell for doing so? Probably not. But if nothing matters, if there is nothing after, if this is it, then why not? For both suicide and the other thing. So I think that is a factor in there. Because I don't think the speech really works if it's just like, oh yeah, I mean, there is nothing after, because it would be an easy question. But as I said, it's not solely about that. He's trying to determine what he's going to do moving forward. But people have analyzed that scene for death for eons, and there's nothing I'm going to say new really about that situation. So, but of course, that is the famous to be or not to be. But again, it isn't really, necessarily because when I read it, I kind of just read it how I read it. It was a little bit closer to Andrew Scott, though, but the scene between Ophelia and Hamlet, when he claims he never loved her, which I think is kind of a lie. But that entire scene was just phenomenal in the play that I watched, and that was just great stuff. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I got, and that's not stopping anytime soon, so I'm going to go. But if you've never read Hamlet, honestly, you should. Go check it out. Maybe with some annotated notes, and then go watch the play. Like, it's incredible how well these stories can still move you with how far apart they are from the time period that we are in. Like in that video I made last year, just talking about what I've been reading and stuff and updating people. And but I started with that Assassin's Creed Revelation, quote, who are we that are so blessed to share our stories like this that spread across centuries? And it's true. I mean, people still talk about Shakespeare to this day. Art is still being influenced by Shakespeare to this day, and I don't expect that to stop in the next 80 years or so. I expect this to be a continual thing long after I am dead, because Shakespeare has stood the test of time. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for now. Until next time, I don't know, if you hear your dead father telling you that your uncle killed him, before you go straight to murder, maybe ask some questions, maybe go see a therapist. But regardless, don't just listen to it right off the bat. Till next time.